So last time we looked at writing equations of lines that are parallel. Remember, parallel lines look like that. And what do we know about the slopes of parallel lines again? The slopes are, Dorian? The same. Now, perpendicular doesn't mean parallel. Does anybody know what perpendicular means? Yeah. It's when they intersect, but they intersect in a very special way. These intersect, but those are not perpendicular. Perpendicular means they intersect and they cross at exactly a 90-degree angle. So they basically make like a plus sign. Or it could be a plus sign, that's been rotated so it looks more like an X. But the idea is they cross exactly at 90-degree angles. So that's an example of what perpendicular lines look like. You don't have to put that example on your guided notes. I'm just showing you. This little symbol, have people seen that little symbol before? That symbol just means that two things meet at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so now we're at the guided notes. We know that parallel lines have the same slope. So if I had a line with a slope of 3, and I want to find one parallel, what's the slope going to be? If I had a line with a slope of 3, and I want one that's parallel, yeah? 3. They have to be the same. When we're dealing with perpendicular lines, the slopes have a connection to each other, but they're not the same. But there is a connection. So it says if two lines are perpendicular, then their slopes are two things: opposites and reciprocals. So on line 1, I know it's kind of bigger than what you really need to write. Line 1, put the word opposite. And line 2, put the word reciprocal. We're going to practice what that means first. But here's an example. Somebody give me a number. Any number, yeah? 3. So if I have a line with a slope of 3, and I want to find one that's perpendicular to it, I need to do two things to that number. First, I need to take the opposite. Then I need to take the reciprocal. Can somebody tell me, what does reciprocal mean if you use a simpler word? It has to do with fractions. Yeah? Yeah, it just means to flip it. So reciprocal just means flip. So let's do both of these things to this number. What's the opposite of 3? Let's start with that. Yeah? Negative 3. So there's the first thing. Now, we're about to flip that number, but it's not a fraction. What can you always put in the bottom of something to make it a fraction if it's not a fraction? Yeah? Put 1. So just pretend like there's an invisible 1 in the bottom. Okay, so we took the opposite of it. We got negative 3. And now, flip that. What do you get if you flip negative 3? Oh, Finn?
What do we flip?
We're flipping negative 3.
I'm going to get you 1 over negative 3.
Yeah, we get 1 over negative 3. And it doesn't really matter where you put the negative. Most people just keep the negative in the top. But that's it. So if you had a line with a slope of 3, and you had another line with a slope of negative 1/3, they would be perpendicular. So negative 3 and negative 1/3 are what we call opposite reciprocals. So two things. Make it the opposite, and then flip. Let's try, I think I have a chart where we can practice some more. Well, that's example 1. So we'll practice some more opposite reciprocals. So let's do that first, and then we'll come back in and fill in the guided note. So we're going to jump to example 1 at the bottom because we just went over it. So let's do that right away. Okay. So do you guys have the numbers filled in this left column? No. Okay. So you'll have to fill that in. The number is 2/3. First thing is, can somebody tell me what is the opposite of 2/3? Yeah. That's when you flip it. First, I want just the opposite. Yeah. Yep. -2/3. Good. Now, this slope and this slope are not perpendicular. They're opposites. We have to do one more thing to make it perpendicular. We have to flip it. So what do you get when you flip -2/3?
-3/2.
Exactly. So then what's perpendicular here? This slope and that slope. Those are what we call perpendicular. They have to be opposite reciprocals. Parallel's easier. Parallel, they just have to be the same. Perpendicular, a little harder. Yeah. Yeah, just saying. Okay, how about -3/5? We're going to find the slope that would be perpendicular to that. So it has 2 steps. First, what's the opposite of -3/5? Yep. So this one's positive 3/5. And now, what's the reciprocal of the number we just wrote down? Yeah. Not quite. Yeah. 5/3. So reciprocal just means to flip it. So we took the opposite and we made it positive, and then you flip it. Let's try that. Let's find what the slope would be that's perpendicular to 2. Okay. 2 steps. First step. What's the opposite of 2? Yeah. -2. And again, I would think of it like you have a fraction. And what do you get when you flip -2? Yeah. -1/2. Perfect. So 2 and -1/2 are what we call perpendicular slopes. They're opposites and they're reciprocals. That's the key.
Please excuse the interruption at this time. Thank you.
Okay, let's make up one more here. Let's do, I don't know, 4/5. What's the opposite of 4/5? Oh, so that's when you flip -4/5. And what do you get now when you flip -4/5? Yeah. Exactly. So 4/5 and -5/4 are what we call opposite reciprocals, which means perpendicular. All right, here's one I'm going to give you like this. You don't just look at this one. 2/3 and 3/2. Would those two slopes be perpendicular? In other words, are those two slopes opposite reciprocals? What do you think? Yeah. No. They're reciprocals, but they're not opposites. So these would not be perpendicular. How about if I did that? What do you think, Aiden? Yeah. Now they're opposites and they've been flipped. So these would be considered perpendicular. So that's the key to finding something perpendicular. Take your slope, make it the opposite, and then flip it. So let's go through the steps that we're going to have to do when we write the equation of a perpendicular line. Now, it says here that it's very similar. It's very similar to when we did parallel. But the first thing is, let's write down the formula that we need. It's not y equals mx plus b. Can someone remind me what's the formula that we're going to use? And you guys have a box on your sheet you'll put it in. Does anyone remember what it looks like? Yeah?
y2 minus y1.
Yeah?
Or x2 minus x.
Oh, you're thinking of the formula for slope.
Okay, good.
It's a little different, but it does have y1s and y2s in it. And x1s. Well, it has a y1 and an x1. It has that. Yeah?
Y minus y1
Yeah?
equals parentheses x minus x1.
Perfect. So that's what you want to put in your box. And there's three things that you have to fill in for when you use this formula. The y1, the m, and the x1. You don't, well, we're going to write this down, but you don't touch the y, the equals, or the x. You leave those the same. So let's review what happens. You might not remember because we did it a while ago, but that's why I'm kind of reminding you right now. Do we change the y?
No.
No. Y stays the same. So if you want to just put y stays the same, you can put that. You can put it just stays as y. You're not plugging anything in for that. How about y1? Is that something that we need to plug something in for? Yeah? Yes, it is. The y1 is going to come from a coordinate that they give you. Specifically, it has to be the number that's after a comma. So they're going to give you a coordinate, and the number after the comma is the y1. What comes right after the y1? Yeah? Before that. Yeah, equals. We're not going to do anything to the equal sign. We're gonna leave the equal sign right where it is. I don't even know if I mentioned the equal sign here. No, I don't. Yeah. So yeah, the next thing that comes is m. And does m stay the same, or do we have to fill in something for it? Yeah? Yeah, we have to fill in something for it. And what you want to fill in for m is the slope. But remember, you have to do two things to it. It's what we just practiced in the table. Take the opposite of it. So that means if it was like positive, you make it negative. Or if it was negative, you make it positive. So you're going to take the slope they give you in the problem. Step one is to take the opposite of it. And step two is to flip it. Now this step was a little easier when we did parallel because you could just keep the number the same. You didn't have to make it the opposite and flip it. Now you did. So to get the m, you're going to take the slope they give you and do what we did in the table. Make it the opposite and flip it. What comes after the m? Yeah? X. Do we do anything with the x? Nope. X stays the same. We're talking about the x that's not highlighted in yellow. And when we did parallel before we did the midterm, this is exactly how we did it. The x stays the same. And there's one more letter. After the x. What's the last thing that's in the formula? All the way at the end, but before the parentheses. Yep. X1. Does that stay the same, or do we have to change it? We have to change it. It's going to be just like we changed y1. It's going to be from a coordinate. But this time, instead of looking for the number that's after the comma, you want to write down the number that's before the comma. That's your x1. So 3 things you have to figure out. The x1, the y1, and those are given to you, so those are easy. And then the m. And you have to figure out the m doing those 2 steps. Yeah. Yeah. Does everybody have those steps filled in? Let's try examples. We already did example 1, so that was at the bottom of your first page. So now we're at example 2. What I like to do first is off to the side, make a table of the 3 things I need to find. Can someone tell me what's one of the things we have to fill a number in for? Yep. We're going to need something for y1. What's something else we need to fill in for? Yep. x1. And someone give me the last thing I need to fill in for. Yep. M. Good. Now, those are the 3 things I have to find. Over here, I'm going to put down the formula I need to use. Can someone remind me, what is our point slope formula? What's the entire equation? Yeah.
Y minus y1 is have parentheses slash.
So that's what we need to fill into after we know these 3 numbers. So remember, the x1 and the y1 come from a coordinate they give you in the problem. And then let's worry about m after. Anyone think they know what x1 is? Abby? Yeah. It's x1 is the number before the comma in the coordinate they give you. So -3. How about y1? Anyone think they know what the y1 is? Tirza? 1. It's the number after the comma in the coordinate. Now the m. You've got to be a little bit careful with the m. Got the x1 and the y1. So you've used the coordinate. There's nothing else you need to do with the -3 and the 1. Now you need to look at this. First thing is to tell me what number here is the slope. that number is going to be like my original number. It's like what I would put right here in the table. Yeah? 1/2. Perfect. That's the slope of the original line. So it's like you're going to put, it's like putting a 1/2 in this box. What I want to put for M, where is it? What I want to put for M is what would go in this box. That's the answer for M. It's the opposite reciprocal of the number they gave you. Okay, so our slope here is 1/2. What's the opposite of 1/2? Yeah? -1/2. And we've got to do one more thing to that to make it perpendicular. Take the -1/2 and flip it. What do you get when you flip -1/2? Yep.
-2/1.
Yep, exactly. That's the M we have to use in this problem. You can write -2/1, or you can also just put -2. Same thing. If we were doing parallel, that's what we did before the midterm, you would have just used the number 1/2 for M. You would have used the same number. Because parallel lines have the same slope. But if we want to be perpendicular to this one, we need to make the slope opposite, and we need to flip. And that's it. Now we just fill it in. Okay. Start with Y. What happens to Y? Yeah, stays the same. How about Y1? What are we going to fill in for Y1? Yeah? 1. Equals. M. What are we going to fill in for M? -2. Parenthesis. What happens to the X? Yeah. Stays the same. And I copy down the minus because that's going to stay right there. And what are we going to fill in for x1? Yep.
3.
-3. So we're going to be a little careful because what happens here is we had a minus in the original formula and we get another minus from the coordinate. So we have minus a minus. I'm just going to change it right there. What happens when you do minus a minus? Turns into a, yeah? Turns into a plus. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it a plus. If you want to rewrite the whole thing to make it a plus, you can do that too. And this is called point slope form. Now the other form we studied was, does anybody remember what the other one, what it looked like? I think this was the easier one. Yeah?
Y equals mx plus b.
The other one we studied was y equals mx plus b. It's where you get everything on the right side except for the y. Well, let's do that here. This answer is correct if they ask for point slope form. But if they ask for this form, we just have to do two things to that. Does anybody remember what you have to do with this -2 on the right side because it's in front of parentheses? Yep. Yep. You would distribute it. What's -2 times x? Oh, Joe?
-2 times x.
Yep. And what's -2 times +3?
1.
No, we're multiplying. Except it's negative 2 times 3. Negative 6, yep. So if they ask for y equals mx plus b, that's the first step. And what's my last step?
Can I know that one?
Yep, do you know my last step?
Wouldn't you get rid of the negative 1?
And how would you get rid of it?
Plus 1, and then like add it to the negative 6.
So if they ask for the y equals mx plus b, you just have to add the 1 to both sides. Yep. And now that gives you 0 for the negative 1 plus 1. And what's negative 6 plus 1? Yeah, negative 5. So both of these answers are correct. This is called slope-intercept form. The top one is point slope. If they don't ask you to change it to slope-intercept form, then I wouldn't do it. Both of these answers are exact, they're perfect. So let's do one more, except we're going to leave it in point slope form. We're not going to change it to slope intercept. Okay, let's make our chart. X1, Y1, and M. Write down your formula. And you don't have to memorize it. You can put it on a reference sheet so you have it. And let's go through it. Anyone think they know what X1 is? Yep. No, remember the X1 and Y1 come from a coordinate.
X1?
So you want to be focusing on this.
X1 negative 3.
Yep. Good. How about Y1? Yeah? Perfect. And anyone think they can tell me what M is? I'll give you a hint. If we were doing parallel, M would be negative 3. But I want perpendicular, so I need to do 2 things to that number. Yeah?
1/3.
Perfect. Make it the opposite, which is 3, and then flip it. Make it 1/3. The reason you have to do that is because of this word right here. If it says perpendicular, take the opposite and flip it, and that's your M. Let's fill it in. What happens to Y? About Finn? What happens to Y?
I don't know.
Yeah, stays the same. How about Y1? Yeah,
I'm gonna be 5.
that would be the 5. The next thing is the M. What's the M in this case? Yeah, 1/3. It's the opposite flipped of the M they gave you originally. What happens to the X? Micah, what happens to the X?
Stays the same.
Yes, stays the same. And Micah, what about X1? Okay, guys, I need you to pay attention here that X1, it's right on the board. It says X1 equals, and it tells us the number.
-3.
So what's going to happen when you fill in a -3 there?
They'll cancel each other out. There's 2 negatives.
There are 2 negatives, but they turn into a
Positive.
positive. And if they do not say to get y by itself, you can leave your answer just like that. Okay, so we'll practice some more of those when we do a warm-up tomorrow. Okay, so the homework is a worksheet on 4.3 part 2, but here's the thing on the worksheet, you do not have to do the word problem. I think there's a word problem that looks something like this. Don't do the word problem. We're going to do the word problem as a warm-up. So skip the word problem.